Okay, so we're back and going to talk about the WWCF. Um, so WWCF week one goes on Tuesday, so we're into the 2039 season. I'm gonna probably use the web page a little bit more than I use the actual game to talk about some of this because it's a little easier to see. Unfortunately, WWCF is a very old app. It's from 2006. It's only been updated since 2015, and of course, it's made by Grey Dog Software. Um, but it wasn't made in the age of streaming, so it's not going to really show up well. So WWCF, of course, is the oldest of the bowl-bound college football leagues. We have at SimNation. The other one, of course, is GDCFL. Uh, not going to go into which one I like better. I like them both. I commissioned them both. Um, we just finished assign red shirts and set the depth chart. Week one goes on Tuesday. Week two on Thursday. Week three on Saturday. So the next time we talk, we'll be 3 weeks into the season. Um, it's going to be an interesting season. The last season, of course, Maryland defeated Rutgers for the WWCF championship. Rutgers is probably going to be looking to get some revenge. We've had some movement and some changes in general, which is going to kind of shape the landscape of this coming season. But I don't think certain things are going to change. For instance, Texas Tech is going to run the ball. Maryland's going to throw the ball. You're going to see some of the SEC powerhouses are just going to beat on each other until in the submission. You'll likely see a couple of the coaches have multiple teams in the playoffs, and it's going to kind of become a very interesting season. I'll talk about the wild card in all this because we had a coach come back this off season, and Beats, who to me is going to be the dark horse. And the reason why I say that is Beats is a phenomenal coach, and he's at Notre Dame. Notre Dame is one of the untapped teams in the league, so we'll talk about that in a second. So I'm gonna kind of go conference by conference because I think that's the easiest way to talk about this. So in the ACC, really you have three teams in the Atlantic that are human controlled, if I remember correctly, and don't get mad if I miss it. It's Maryland, Florida State, Navy. So me, Nigel, and Max. Um, Maryland hasn't lost the Atlantic Division since our 2010 season. Probably not going to happen this year. Ironically, the last team to beat them was Florida State under Nigel. Um, Maryland just they're a powerhouse. They're in the playoffs every year. They traditionally are in the semifinals or finals every year. Not going to be an easy team to knock out. Now Navy's up and coming under Max. I expect in a season or two they're going to really do that. Florida State always plays higher than the prestige level. They're a 50 prestige team, but Nigel always does a good job of getting more out of that team than one should expect from that prestige level. So it's possible, not likely. Um, in the coastal, I kind of expect the coastal to be a little wide open. It was last season. Georgia Tech is Dave. Virginia Tech, of course, is Harry. And then Marcus is at Miami. Marcus is a very good coach. So is Dave. So is Harry. It's going to be a toss-up. Virginia Tech had a pretty solid recruiting year this last season. So did Georgia Tech. Miami is just a hard team to get past. I think I talked about this previously. To me, I think that I'm vacillating a little bit between Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech. I think it'll really come to late in the season. It's too close to call. But one of those two teams will probably win the Coastal. And it's quite possible for the ACC to probably send two teams to the playoffs this year because, again, unlike draft day sports, bowl bound, 16 team playoff, 10 conference champions go. 6 at-large bids, so it is quite possible that they could send 2. In the Big East, Berto is at West Virginia. This is like his first season though. Um, Mike hasn't returned yet at Marshall. So I really think that Rutgers is going to likely win the North again. Miller's on a kind of a streak, anyways. He wants to get back to the championship game, or find Maryland sometime in the playoffs so he can avenge his loss to them. So I expect Rutgers to win the North, although Berto will give them a run for his money at West Virginia. Um, in the South, I think it's South Florida. If I remember correctly, that is Rob. Um, the other teams are largely human controlled. I'm sorry, CPU controlled. So I think Rob will get there, win the South with South Florida. They're a decent team. Their main competition will be Cincinnati. Um, but regardless, I think whoever makes it, I think Rutgers wins the Big East this season. Um, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the players. But from a Big Ten perspective, I think this one's probably going to be one of the more wide opens. And again, you got Jacob at Pittsburgh. That should be pretty interesting. And then you have Beats at Notre Dame. And I think Jacob is a very good coach, and I think that he's going to have them pretty well dialed in. So, but I think Notre Dame was a team 2 seasons ago that stormed their way into the semifinals. And I think we're very close to just taking it all. So I think under the right coach, Notre Dame's a powerhouse. I think Beats is the right coach. I'm going to go ahead and say that it's close, but Notre Dame wins the East. And then, of course, in the West, you have Greg at Michigan. You have Rob at Ohio State. Um, I think Rob wins. Ohio State's done pretty well, but if Greg is back and he's back full time, I think Michigan wins. Michigan's a very good, solid squad, but I don't think he's back full time yet. So I'm gonna go with Rob versus Graham, who's Beats, and then Beats wins it. But Ohio State makes it into the playoffs because they'll have a pretty good record, especially if they down Michigan. The Big 12, again, this is one of those it all depends on if Greg's back at Oklahoma. If he's back at Oklahoma, I think it's pretty wide open. If he's not, then I think it'll be Baylor. Baylor won last season. They didn't win the season before, I think, but I think Baylor had a strong recruiting season and they've got a pretty good team. So it'll be either Baylor or Oklahoma in the North. I think it's Baylor. In the South, the toss-up will be between Max at Texas A&M, Miro at Texas Tech, John at Texas, and Mike at Bryce. I think in the end, it really comes down to John versus Miro, Texas Tech versus Texas. I think that in the end, let me see if either of them, yeah. John typically gets the shaft on the schedule more so than anyone else. I think that Miro actually will win the South. Texas will make it into the playoffs. And then Texas Tech will do what they do every season to Baylor and just beat up on Baylor. And this is one of those conferences where you could actually end up with 3 teams in the playoffs with Baylor, Texas Tech, and Texas. I think it'll be 2. It'll be Texas Tech and Texas. I think Baylor will be going to the Cotton Bowl again. And then Conference USA. This one's an interesting one. So Harry's at Ball State. I think Mike is at Northwestern. That seems to be right. But Illinois is the other Mike, Schmigo. And then you have John at Air Force. I think in the East, all paths lead through Ball State with Harry. I think that doesn't change this season. I think Ball State wins it. In the West, most seasons it's a back and forth between Illinois and Air Force. I think that holds true again this season. I'm going to go with John. It'll be close, and I'll probably get this one wrong because Mike tends to win when I go against him. But be John versus John's Air Force versus Harry's Ball State. That came out wrong, but I think Ball State wins and Air Force goes to a bowl. In the MAC, Army is Tim. I think he's the only human control team in the MAC. Army's made very big changes, and they continue to get better every year. It'll be them versus Connecticut in the East. I think Army takes it this season, and they win the East. In the West, it's really Northern Illinois and Western Kentucky. I think Western Kentucky wins it again. And then as much as I want to see Army beat Western Kentucky, I think it's just hard. Western Kentucky's a little bit of a powerhouse. So I think Western Kentucky wins the MAC. By the way, I'm going to get most of these wrong. Just so if you record this and you bring it back to me later in the season, I'll probably do that, right? You'll find that I've missed most of these. Mountain West, if I remember correctly, we only have one team in the Mountain West that's human controlled. That's Wyoming. That's Rob again. I think Wyoming wins the East. It'll be them or Idaho. Idaho won it last season. They may have won it the season before. But I like Rob's chances of beating Idaho this year. Maybe you'll get a little bit of help from Mill because he always plays Idaho with Texas Tech and Rutgers. Maybe he'll enjoy a couple players and that'll allow them to go. In the West, it's a toss-up. I think Hawaii or UNLV will be there. I'm going to say Hawaii. So it'll be Hawaii versus Wyoming. Wyoming will win it. And unfortunately, they will likely pull the number one seed, which Rob will have to be on top of his game to get past that. Out in the Pac-12, again, if I remember correctly, you have, let me just double check here and make sure that I got this right. Yeah, that's what I thought. So Pac-12, we only really have two human teams now. So Cal is Marcus, USC is Mike. USC and Cal will win their respective divisions, Cal North, USC South, and it'll be Cal versus USC, with likely USC winning it. But two teams will make it into the playoffs from the Pac-12. It'll be Cal and USC, and one of those will probably make a very deep run this year. SEC, this one is probably one of the most packed conferences from a human perspective. So at South Carolina, you have me, you have John at Tennessee, you have Harry at Florida, you have Max at Georgia, you have, Tennessee is Greg, LSU is John, you have Delbert at Mississippi, you have Tim at Alabama. The East is Florida versus Georgia. If I'm either of those two coaches, I'm not worried about winning the division because I'm going to the playoffs. This is a conference that routinely puts three in the playoffs. I'm going to go Georgia because Max had that really, really stellar recruiting class. It'll be close, but Harry with Florida will make it into the playoffs. Max wins the East. In the West, our roads lead through either Oxford or Tuscaloosa, so Mississippi or Alabama. It'll probably be Alabama this season. John will make it interesting at LSU and Baton Rouge, but I don't see him beating Tim at Alabama. So what I worry about with Tim at Alabama is if he gets more than one loss. He does play Rutgers every year in the Crimson Bowl, which is Rutgers versus Alabama. if he gets a second loss, he's not making the playoffs more than likely. So it'll be an interesting story to watch. He really needs to get through conference play with only one loss, and then it is feasible he could make it in playoffs with 3 losses, but he's got to beat Rutgers this year to really stay in that playoff picture. LSU should go to a high bowl. South Carolina, Tennessee, they'll go to bowls. I think they have the last 2 seasons. Greg's a person to watch at Tennessee. He's done a good job of getting that program back on track. South Carolina, every year is a 5-7 team. If I remember correctly, in the Sun Belt, we only have one team, Middle Tennessee State, which is Mike Cart. Middle Tennessee State will win the East, and then in the West it'll be Southern Methodist. It'll be Middle Tennessee versus SMU. Middle Tennessee will win it, and that will be that. So I think if you think about this, if I had to pick a Final Four going into this, I don't think Maryland will be in the Final Four this year. Main reason being is they got some defensive issues, and that offense isn't going to be able to compensate for it. I do think Texas Tech will be there. I do think Georgia will be there. I think that Rutgers will be there, and I'm going to say Notre Dame. So let's just hypothetically say that it's Texas Tech versus Georgia and Rutgers versus Notre Dame. I think Texas Tech advances over Georgia only because of that running a game, but it'll be a really interesting game because both teams are rushing attacks. Rutgers, I think, will lose to Notre Dame. It'll be Beats versus Merrill in the final, Texas Tech versus Notre Dame, and unfortunately I think Texas Tech is too much for Notre Dame and they will win. We get a good idea in week 2 of how good Texas Tech is because Maryland and Texas Tech play each other, and that will give us a good lead in to kind of understanding what's going on there. From a top 25, if you look at it, week 1 we got Rutgers versus Texas, number 1 versus number 4. You have you have number 3 California versus number 7 Maryland. You have number 9 USC versus number 21 Baylor. So we got some big games this week. West Virginia, Virginia Tech is a big game. I don't know why Virginia Tech's not ranked. CPU really hates the ACC. Traditionally, the ACC is ranked lower than any other conference. It kind of goes back to the days when that probably was due, but not now. So I think if we look at week 1, I mentioned some of the games. I think Pittsburgh beats Tulsa relatively easy. Texas Rutgers, it's a really hard game to call. I know that the CPU seems to think Rutgers will win this one easily. Rutgers has issues with passing attacks. Texas is a passing attack. So I'm going to say that John beats Merrill. And Rutgers drops out of the number 1 spot early. South Florida versus Temple, that'll be South Florida. Ohio State will beat Indiana. Georgia will easily beat Nebraska. USC will down Baylor. That'll be a good game to watch. Texas Tech will just absolutely obliterate Idaho. Alabama should do the same to Washington State. Michigan State will easily get by Oklahoma State. Cincinnati should down Southern Miss. TCU should easily get by Tulane. Marshall will beat up on Kansas pretty bad. Utah will do the same to Colorado. Oregon should get past Minnesota, will be closer than you think. I think that Cal downs Maryland in week 1. Again, I'm concerned about that defense. Virginia Tech will get past West Virginia, and then Michigan will just absolutely blow Appalachian State out of the water. Mike will get past Purdue relatively easy. Oklahoma will be an easy win for Iowa State. You have the first of the Commander-in-Chief trophy games with Navy versus Air Force. I think I said earlier that I think Air Force wins the Commander-in-Chief this year, so we'll see if that holds up. Certainly the CPU thinks that Air Force is going to win this, but got to be careful though because again, Navy is Max. Max is really good in every league he does. I'm not going to predict Heisman Trophy. It's too hard. I'll do that sometime around week 4 or week 6, because every year someone emerges out of nowhere. I think it's safe to say that your Heisman Trophy finalist will probably be a running back from Georgia, quarterback from Maryland, running back from Texas Tech, maybe a quarterback from Texas. And then there'll be some other people that we haven't thought of. There's always a running back that pops out of somewhere. Um, your Bednarik winner, which is the best defensive player, that one's even harder to do because every year they just come out of nowhere. Um, Coach of the year, I think, if all things hold true, I think Beats may win it. Hopefully, I'm not jinxing him. I haven't done a podcast before, so I don't know how bad I'm jinxing people. But overall, it should be a really good season. If you're interested, definitely join us. This is a really good league to join. Lots of good coaches. It's a wide open competition. No, it doesn't seem that way when you look at who's won titles and stuff. But most seasons, the final 8, if not the final 4, have a whole bunch of different coaches in there. Um, if you want to join us, go to wwcf.us and just take a look there and choose a team and let me know. I'll post the stuff there for you to take a look at. Um, Unlike other things, this won't really tell us much. But if you look at the recruiting, the top recruit is Sierra's a quarterback out of California. Uh, be interesting to see where he goes. He's probably going to go to USC or California. Top defensive player is a cornerback out of Maryland, out of Good Counsel. He's probably not going to Maryland. I'll just call that right now. He's probably going to go to probably someplace like Rutgers or Virginia Tech. And then out of the Midwest, the top player was a safety. Likely will go to Michigan. And then if you look at the Southeast, the top player was a kicker. Again, unlike other things, here kickers can be 5 stars. In most leagues, like draft day, highest a kicker is going to get is 3 stars, which is real life, right? So let's just say the top player is really the safety out of a JUCO safety out of Alabama. He'll probably go to Florida or he'll go to Georgia. So it'll be interesting to see. Hopefully you'll follow along with us. If you like this, definitely hit follow if you're on YouTube. Do the same thing if you're on Twitch. We'll podcast again on Saturday and talk about where we are. Not doing a GDCFL one this week because GDCFL there's not much to talk about. There won't be for another 2 weeks potentially. I'll probably do one on Saturday because we'll be talking about transfers as we lead into recruiting. But by the next podcast, we'll be into week 3, and we should have an idea of what's starting to develop from a picture perspective. So thank you for your time. If you want to follow us, go to SimNation.net or follow WWCF.us, and I'll put all the links in there. But have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.